Let's kick things off with a pretty staggering number, 2 crore rupees. That is roughly how much Reliance Industries earns every single minute today. I mean, just let that sink in for a sec.
All right, let's jump right into this. Welcome everyone. Today we're diving into an explainer of what is literally the ultimate rags to riches thriller. We're going to break down the absolutely unorthodox playbook of India's most ambitious man, Dhirubhai Ambani. We're looking at exactly how a village school teacher's son managed to build India's largest company, and we'll break down the exact strategies he used to get there.
Let's kick things off with a pretty staggering number, 2 crore rupees. That is roughly how much Reliance Industries earns every single minute today. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. You blink, 60 seconds pass, and boom, another 2 crore.
But to really get why that's so mind-blowing, we have to look at the contrast. Our story actually kicks off back in the 1950s with a man working as a simple clerk in Aden. He spent his days standing in the sweltering heat, just filling up vehicles with petrol. You know, it's funny, his very first interviewer actually made a note about his heavy footsteps. He said the guy walked like he had somewhere incredibly important to be, and almost no time to get there. And man, was he right about that.
Which brings us to our first main chapter, the hustler's instinct, and spotting that very first loophole.
So, born in 1932 to a really poor family in a village in Gujarat, a 16-year-old Dhirubhai moves to Aden. He's got no money, no family business backing up, absolutely no connections. But what he did have was this completely different kind of hunger, and a razor-sharp instinct for seeing opportunities that everyone else was just walking right past. For example, in Aden they used a currency called the Yemeni rial. While Dhirubhai noticed this brilliant, almost unbelievable mathematical loophole, the actual physical silver inside the rial was worth more than the exchange value of the coin itself. So, think about that. You could buy a rial for the equivalent of, say, 10 British pounds, melt it down, and then sell that extracted silver to bullion dealers in London for 12 pounds. Boom! A direct profit of 2 pounds per coin. He essentially found a completely legal way to print money. He made several locks doing this before the authorities finally noticed all their coins were vanishing and shut it down.
Moving on to Section 2, Mastering the Loophole and the 350-square-foot room.
By 1958, a 26-year-old Dhirubhai decides, okay, it's time to build my own empire. He heads back to Bombay, and he literally squeezes these massive ambitions into a tiny 350-square-foot room. We're talking 1 telephone, a table, and 3 chairs, which he shared with his cousin, Champaklal Damani. At first, they were exporting spices and textiles, but Dhirubhai quickly sniffed out his next massive loophole in India's super-restricted market. See, there was a huge demand for synthetic threads, but local production was only covering maybe 10 to 20% of it. So he zeroes in on the government's replenishment licenses, or REP for short. It was a rule designed to balance trade. If you export 100 rupees worth of textiles, you get permission to import 20 rupees of those highly coveted artificial threads.
Now, here's the kicker. A lot of exporters had these licenses, but they just weren't using them. So Dhirubhai goes fully on the offensive. He aggressively buys up these unused licenses from other exporters, paying top dollar for them. By hoarding these, he effectively builds a monopoly. He basically corners the entire market on synthetic thread imports and then turns right around and sells those desperately needed threads to domestic manufacturers at absolutely massive profit margins.
But, you know, playing the game this aggressively caused some serious friction. Dhirubhai predicted that thread prices were going to skyrocket, so he piled up a massive inventory. His more conservative cousin, Champaklal, completely panicked. He demanded Dhirubhai reduce the inventory. So Dhirubhai actually did, by essentially selling the inventory back to himself. A few weeks later, prices surged exactly like he thought, and he made an absolute fortune. He did offer Champaklal a cut of the profits, but he paired it with a pretty brutal reality check. He told him, don't interfere in a business you don't understand. By 1965, the partnership was over, and Dhirubhai bought him out completely.
Section 3. Taking it to the masses and the people's IPO. So at this point, Dhirubhai is completely over just being a middleman. He wanted to make the textiles himself. He buys land in Gujarat and launches his own brand, which you might have heard of, Vimal. He noticed the Indian market really didn't have established textile brands, so he goes all in. He spends what was at the time an absolutely mind-boggling amount of money, a massive 1 crore rupees every single year, just on flashy marketing, fashion shows, huge billboards. He positions only Vimal as this exclusive, premium yet mass-market brand, and he expands rapidly using a Western-style franchise model, opening up around 400 shops all across the country.
But how do you fund all those factories?
Well, Dhirubhai pulls off an absolute masterstroke in 1977. Instead of going to the traditional wealthy families or massive institutions for cash, he bypasses them entirely. He launches the Reliance IPO, offering 28 lakh shares directly to the public for just 10 rupees each. The response? It was oversubscribed 7 times over. By 1978, that price had surged to 50 rupees. He literally made the Indian middle class his business partners, multiplied their wealth 5 times over, and essentially became a hero to the everyday small investor.
Which brings us to Section 4, Wars and Squeezes and Beating the Bear Cartel.
Now, as you can imagine, a rise this fast makes you some pretty powerful enemies. In 1982, an alleged Kolkata-based bear cartel decided to launch this massive, coordinated attack on Reliance shares. They used a tactic called short selling. Basically, they borrowed Reliance shares and sold them at a high price of 131 rupees, hoping it would trigger massive panic selling. The whole plan was to crash the price, buy the shares back for pennies, return them to the original lenders, and just pocket the giant difference. They dumped 3.5 lakh shares in half an hour, and drove the price down to 121 rupees.
So day one, the bears dumped their shares. But then comes this totally wild twist. Mysterious buyers from West Asian countries suddenly step in and start absorbing all that massive supply. It didn't matter what the bears sold, these buyers just bought it all up. By week 6, instead of crashing, Reliance stock actually surged to 201 rupees. The bears were caught in a brutal squeeze, forced to buy back shares at devastating losses just to cover their loans. Many of them were financially ruined. And the crazy part? Those mysterious buyers who bought up 10 crore worth of shares were allegedly backed by Dhirubhai himself, though, to be fair, no official link was ever definitively proven.
Section 5, Wars and Rivalries, Navigating the License Raj.
Okay, so the 70s and 80s in India were famously defined by extreme government control, the license Raj. Dhirubhai knew that building an empire meant you absolutely needed powerful political ties. And this became super obvious during his really intense rivalry with Bombay Dyeing's Nusli Wadia. To give you a sense of how cutthroat things got, when Bombay Dyeing tried to set up a new plant, their manufacturing license was mysteriously blocked for 2 whole years. And when their equipment finally arrived, Customs suddenly decided to detain it for 4 weeks for inspection. At the exact same time, a negative media campaign pops up out of nowhere, labeling Bombay Dyeing's products as junk. This was allegedly fueled by a group of journalists that people started calling the Dirty Dozen. We're just impartially reporting what the sources say here, but the pressure tactics were allegedly intense.
But Bombay Dyeing definitely had powerful allies of its own. Enter Ramnath Goenka, the fiery owner of the Indian Express. He strikes back hard. He puts his star investigative journalist, Swaminathan Gurumurthy, on the case to expose Reliance's business practices. This turns into an all-out media war, leading to some very severe government scrutiny. By 1985, Reliance was facing a massive CBI inquiry and roughly 27 crore rupees in excise evasion notices. The pressure was unimaginable.
Section 6, the ultimate integration and defying the odds.
Unsurprisingly, the insane stress of these relentless corporate and political wars took a devastating physical toll. In 1986, Dhirubhai suffered a massive stroke. He had to be rushed to the US, literally hovering between life and death for weeks. When he finally came back to India, the entire right side of his body was paralyzed. Honestly, everyone in the industry thought, well, that's it, his era's over. But while the stroke might have severely slowed his body, his mind was still incredibly sharp. He absolutely shocked the world by just going right back to work, driven by this singular, relentless focus on achieving his ultimate business dream.
And that dream brings us to an absolute masterclass in business strategy known as backward integration. Check this out. Up until 1980, Reliance basically just made textiles. But to make those textiles, they had to buy polyester threads from other people. So Dhirubhai decides, let's build a plant to make our own threads. But wait, threads are made from petrochemicals, right? So he builds massive plants to make those too. Well, petrochemicals come from a refinery, and refineries process crude oil. So instead of relying on anyone else, he systematically built out the capability to own every single step of the supply chain backwards, all the way down to crude oil.
Of course, building an operation this massive was never going to be easy. Right in the middle of this huge expansion, disaster strikes. Insane monsoon floods completely submerge their critical Padal Ganga plant. We're talking hundreds of crores worth of high-tech machinery totally underwater. It looked like the whole dream was pushed back by years. But that classic Ambani resilience kicked right in. Under the leadership of his son Mukesh Ambani, an entire army of workers dismantled, meticulously cleaned, and reassembled the entire plant on a war footing. And astonishingly, they got the whole thing fully operational again in exactly 1 month. 1 month!
That unrelenting drive eventually culminated in 1993 with the announcement of India's very first private sector oil refinery down in Jamnagar. This thing is an engineering marvel. It was a staggering $6 billion investment with the capacity to refine 27 million tons. That was a full 25% of all of India's crude oil. And fun fact, because they built it in a super arid area, Dhirubhai actually had them plant over 100,000 mango trees around the refinery, literally breaking an environmental record originally set by the Mughal Emperor Akbar. When it finally went fully operational in 2000, his grand vision of total backward integration was 100% complete.
In April of 2002, Dhirubhai addressed his loyal shareholders for what would sadly be the very last time. He looked back at his entire journey, from standing in the hot sun as a petrol clerk in Aden, all the way to building this absolute global energy titan. And he left them with this quote: "Our dreams must be bigger, our ambitions higher, our commitment deeper, and our efforts greater." Just 2 months later, he suffered a second stroke and passed away, permanently cementing the legacy of a simple schoolteacher's son who built an entire empire.
So as we wrap up this explainer today, I really want you to think about this and look at your own journey. Look at your own industry, your everyday routines. What loopholes, what missing links or unoptimized systems are just hiding right there in plain sight? How can you apply that exact same hustler's instinct to see the hidden value in the silver when everybody else just sees a common coin? Keep looking for those opportunities, guys. Thanks for exploring this story